Hello guys, how are you doing today? Welcome once again to my page. I'm so glad to have you back. So today we are going to be learning about the establishment of Christianity in Nigeria. Okay, so we'll go way back how we started, and before I start, I want you to please make sure that you share this video with your friends. Tell them about this page. Check out other videos on this page that that will be useful to you, and take your time to jot things down, come back to watch again. And if you have questions, do well to drop your questions in the comment section. I'll be there to attend to all your questions. And please subscribe to this channel. It will do me a lot of good if you subscribe to this channel, and please turn on your notification so that when I drop another video you will be notified. The next video I'll be doing after this video will be on the outstanding missionary figures, although I'll be mentioning some of them in this video, but I'll definitely still talk about them. All right, so let's get right into what I have for you today. Okay, so now when you're talking about establishment of Christianity in Nigeria, you have to mention the first contact. That's like the early contact, which happened in 15th century. So like I mentioned in the last video about how Christianity was established in Sierra Leone, I said in case you cannot remember the year, you can just put century. So now this arrival of Portuguese in Nigeria was in 1400, right? But you can call it 15th century, or you can say early 15th century. Okay, so the Portuguese explorers, they call them Portuguese explorers. So for them to be Portuguese explorers, they are from Portugal, right? So these Portuguese explorers were the first Europeans to bring Christianity to Nigeria. Okay, so when they came to Nigeria, where did they go to? They actually focused on Benin Kingdom, the present day Edo State. They also focused on Warri Kingdom, which is now the present day Delta State. Okay, so these Portuguese missionaries, when they came, they introduced Roman Catholicism to the people. You realize that in most part of the eastern part of Nigeria, realize that a lot of people there, they attend Roman Catholic Church, right? So these Portuguese missionaries introduced Roman Catholicism, and then they tried to convert the Oba of Benin and his people, which was a bit it was like, I don't want to say a bit difficult, but they didn't really achieve as much as they would have loved to. Okay, so but while they were at it, while they were trying to like convert people and all of that, they were able to build churches, in these kingdoms, and they were also able to convert few of the people in the kingdom, to Christianity. Few of those locals, accepted Christianity, right? But like I said earlier, the influence was very, very limited. They were not able to do much, they were unable to like engage with the local cultures. And one of the reasons, because of we have superstition. One of the things is that they don't want them to baptize their child. And when you become born again, you have to be baptized, so that they know that baptism is part of the process. But they believe that when they dip their child inside water, they will die. So different things, different factors, led to them not achieving success. So they could not stay long, and then they were trying to also train their priests, their sons as priests. And there's even one that could not, as a Catholic priest, you won't have sex now, you won't, have intercourse with someone, but he could not, right? He could not hold himself. So like I said, a lot of factors, prevented them from achieving great success when they came. I'm still talking about the Portuguese explorer. And another thing was they focused more on trade, especially slave trade, and then I also believe that they did not have large-scale missionary follow-up, like enough resources to be able to do what they wanted to do. So the early impact faded with time. It didn't last long, right? So if you're talking about early establishment, you have to talk about the arrival of Portuguese in Nigeria. So now moving on, so that was in what, in the 15th century. Now moving on to, so these guys left, they recorded mass death and all of that, and because they were also involved in slavery, so the people did not even trust them. Okay, so now moving on to the 19th century, right? So in the 19th century, we have, you know, like in the last video I talked about how we had free slaves in Freetown, right? So now these free slaves, remember I said they were already converted to Christ, they were being groomed in Freetown. Now in the early 1800, so you can say in the early 18th or early 19th century, these freed African slaves who had been converted to Christianity in Sierra Leone began returning to Nigeria. Okay, so they started going back to, you know, their home country. They started returning to Nigeria. So these guys brought the Christian faith. You know, they brought the Christian faith, they brought Western education. If you remember, I mentioned that in Sierra Leone, they did not just tell them about Jesus, they also sent them to school. You know, so these guys returning to Nigeria, they came with the Christian faith, they came with Western education, and also a desire to what? To spread the gospel. Are we still together? So now getting here, around this same time, the European missionaries also, especially from Britain, they started entering Nigeria. Okay, so these European missionaries, they came with a goal to evangelize, to build churches, and even to educate the locals, the people in Nigeria, right? So this effort actually marked the beginning of organized Christianity in Nigeria. So the Portuguese explorers' contact wasn't enough, but these freed African slaves that returned to Nigeria, they actually started, you know, the beginning of organized Christianity in Nigeria. All right, so now let's look at some key events or some notable figures, you know, that were involved, you know, in the establishment of Christianity in Nigeria. I'm going to start with this guy, Reverend Thomas Freeman. Reverend Thomas Freeman, right? This guy arrived in Badagry. Okay, he arrived in Badagry in 1842. Okay, now this guy was representing the Methodist missionary. So you already know Methodist church, right? You know, his coming actually marked a launch of Methodist mission in Nigeria. So if you are talking about how Methodist started in Nigeria, you go back to who? Reverend Thomas Freeman. His second name is, I think, Birch, Birch, Reverend Thomas Birch Freeman. So this guy came representing the Methodist missionary, and his coming marked the formal launch of Methodist mission work in Nigeria. Now when he came, he preached, baptized converts, he helped build one of the first Methodist churches in Nigeria. So you take note of that, Reverend Thomas Freeman. Then we have Reverend Henry Townsend. You already know that Henry Townsend was in Sierra Leone, right? So Henry Townsend represented the Anglican missionary. So in that same year that Freeman came, that same 1842, you know, Henry Townsend, an Anglican missionary, arrived also in Abeokuta. He arrived in Abeokuta. Remember I said Thomas arrived in Badagry, right? Badagry is very close to Lagos, so yeah. So Henry Townsend, Reverend Henry Townsend, arrived in Abeokuta. So this Henry Townsend worked closely with those returnees from Sierra Leone. You know, he returned with them, and then he translated the Bible into Yoruba. And then Townsend was also responsible for starting the Nigerian's first newspaper. He started the Nigerian's first newspaper, which was called Iwe Iroyin in 1859. I hope you are taking note of all of that. And he used that to promote Christian teachings and literacy. So these two men played foundational roles in the Christian mission in Nigeria. Reverend Thomas Freeman and Reverend Henry Townsend. Freeman, Methodist mission; Henry Townsend, Anglican missionary. Do take note of that. All right, so now we have the missionary societies that came into Nigeria during that 19th century. You know, each of them brought different things, right, that they wanted to do. So I'm going to be talking about them and what they contributed. So I will start with Church Missionary Society. So they can ask you in your exams, like, you should talk about missionaries' work in Nigeria. What were their contributions? This is what they are talking about. So we have the Church Missionary Society, called Anglican, right? These people contributed to Bible translation. They translated the Bible. Remember I mentioned earlier that Reverend Henry Townsend worked closely with the returnees from Sierra Leone, you know, and he translated Bible to what? Into Yoruba. So they built schools, that's Anglican. They built schools, built churches, and also the Iweroyin, the Nigerian's first newspaper, they started this. So you can also read more on their contributions. Moving on to Methodist Missionary Society, the Methodist Church. Evangelism, their contribution, evangelism. They evangelized, education, educated the people, health missions. Excuse me, health missions. So they did health missions to, you know, to take care of people. You know, when people say, there's how they say it in my language, that people come, they check them for free, and through that, you know, you tell them about the gospel. So Methodist Church, vigorous evangelism, sharing of tracts, education, ensuring the people are educated, and then health missions. And also we have the Roman Catholic mission. That's the Catholic, right? The Catholic also came to Nigeria, you know, and what did they do? They also built churches, they built hospitals. Please note all these things. They built hospitals, built schools, you know, and they also got themselves involved in all this rural outreach. You know, rural outreach. They did a lot of rural outreaches. Then I can't end it without mentioning the Presbyterian Church. I know you'd have heard of Presbyterian, yeah. They are kind of popular in the southeast. You know, they built schools, they also built churches. Okay, so these all these missionary bodies opened printing presses, translated the Bible into local languages like Yoruba, Igbo, Efik. They trained the local people to become pastors. So when I say local people, I mean like the indigenes, the people in the land. They trained them to become pastors, trained them to become teachers. Okay, are we still together? So before I end the class, I also want to talk about this Bishop Ajayi Crowther. So Samuel Ajayi Crowther, okay, it was Samuel Ajayi Crowther I was referring to the other time, that was in Sierra Leone. You know, he was a Yoruba boy that was captured by slave traders, and then Ajayi Crowther was rescued by the British Navy, you know, and they took him to Sierra Leone. Right now, when they took him to Sierra Leone, he was converted in Sierra Leone, he was educated, and they later returned to Nigeria as a missionary. So after they have trained him, you know, to become a pastor and all of that, he returned to Nigeria as a missionary, you know, under the CMS, right? He translated the Bible into Yoruba, okay, and he helped spread Christianity. Now let me say something so that you won't be confused. You know that I mentioned earlier that Reverend Thomas was what's it called now? I mentioned earlier that Reverend Henry Townsend worked closely with returnees, you know, to translate the Bible into Yoruba. So he worked with this man called Samuel Ajayi Crowther because he was a Yoruba boy. Do you get? So when you are saying who translated the Bible from English to Yoruba, you definitely reference Samuel Ajayi Crowther. But he worked alongside this Reverend Henry Townsend. Okay, so he translated the Bible into Yoruba, and he helped spread Christianity in many parts of Nigeria, especially along the River Niger. And like I said in the last video, in 1864, he became the first African bishop. The first African bishop, which was what a major achievement. A major achievement. Let's check on Mary Slessor. I know Mary Slessor is quite popular. She's very popular. So Mary Slessor was a Scottish missionary who worked mainly in Calabar. That's Cross River State. Yeah. So she worked in Calabar, and of course she's best known for stopping the killings of twins. You know, it was a cultural practice at that time. you know, and she stopped the killing of twins, and she adopted and raised twins, taught them Christian values, and promoted education for girls. You know, there was a nickname that they gave her, I think the white queen of Okoyong or something like that. The indigenous, they gave her a nickname, the white queen of Okoyong. I don't think they will be asking you that in that exam. All right, so now let's also look at the spread of Christianity. Like, just like, let's say we want to like map it, so mapping it, we can say that the spread of Christianity in Nigeria started from Badagry. So it took root in coastal towns like Badagry, moving to Lagos, Calabar, you can't forget Abeokuta. So that's how Christianity, you know, areas where Christianity first took root, the interior part, right? And from there, it started spreading to interior towns, you know. And how did it spread? Through missionary journeys. Missionaries going to all those towns to preach, through trade routes. People that came to trade, people that came to buy what we have, you know, bronze, all those stuff, people that came to, you know, to trade. And then they were also able to spread Christianity in Nigeria through establishment of schools. So you know, they're telling you that bring your child to school and all of that. There's no way, you know, embrace people that want to educate your child for free. So you'll be open to them and they preach to you and you accept. So they were able to spread Christianity through schools and healthcare missions. You know, when they ask people to, let's check your BP for free, let's check your high for free, you'll be open to them, you will embrace those people, you know. And also those they were able to spread Christianity because of those free slaves, you know, who returned back to their own town, you know. So in their mission schools, what did they do? They taught them reading, taught them writing, arithmetic, you know. And that kind of like attracted many Nigerian families to the school, you know. So we can say that education played a very major role, you know, in the establishment of Christianity in Nigeria. And another thing that they did was all those the fact that they translated the Bible and hymns to their local languages. It actually makes the gospel to be so accessible to the people, you know. And many Nigerians converts became evangelists, catechists, you know, even priests. So because they were able to achieve that, it helped the message spread faster and, you know, more effectively. So that's all that about establishment of Christianity in Nigeria. So let me just do like a short recap. Okay, so I mentioned that the early contact, that's the first contact that they had, was Portuguese explorers who brought Catholicism in 15th century. They went to where I mentioned Benin and what? Yes, and Warri. Very good. Then I talked about the former establishment, the establishment that brought structure into Christianity, which started in what? In 19th century through the freed slaves and then the British missionaries. And I mentioned CMS, I mentioned what? Methodist, I mentioned Presbyterian, I mentioned what? Roman Catholic Church. Please do not forget that. And I also mentioned the key events that happened in 1842. You cannot forget that, right? That was when Reverend Freeman in Badagry, representing the Methodists, you know, came to Nigeria, you know. And then Reverend Townsend went to Abeokuta, representing the Anglican Church. Please do not forget that. And I also talked about CMS, Catholic, Presbyterian, all those missionary societies, how they built churches, schools. And you cannot forget Ajayi Crowther, the first African bishop, Anglican, the first African that became an Anglican bishop. And then you can also not forget Mary Slessor, you know. So that's that about establishment of Christianity in Nigeria. Like I always say, please do well to read further. Okay, do well to read further. And please, if you enjoyed this video, give this video a thumbs up. And please, if you have not subscribed yet, please, I beg you, subscribe to this channel. Okay, thank you so much. See you in the next video. Bye.